Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Healing for Hot Messes podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Quiet Cubicles. Are you a modern human being and you find it borderline impossible to get away from the sound of other human beings and their bullshit? I mean, seriously, you guys, you could go out into the middle of the deep ass woods and you would still hear the sound of planes flying overhead. Quiet cubicles are for you. So, you know those storage bins where you can put your stuff into while you're moving? Quiet cubicles is a lot like that. It is a small, human sized, soundproof box that you can squish yourself into for just a low, low price every month. If you want to understand more about Quiet Cubicles, please go to www.juststuffmyass-into-a-box-already.co.uk. So buckle up. Today's episode is going to be a little bit longer than my prior episodes because I am going to be talking about my experience doing an ayahuasca ceremony. Now, I do want to preface this by saying, although I am going to share my experiences to the best of my ability, like many psychedelic experiences, it is truly something that is very challenging and difficult to describe. I'm also going to be purposely vague about certain things due to the legal status. I'm not going to get into too many details about how I was able to access this ceremony due to the highly personal and subjective nature of the sorts of insights that you get on plant medicines and psychedelic medicines. I'm not going to get too much into personal insights and revelations that I had, mainly because I don't really want to have to explain, 40 years of emotional lore that nobody gives a fuck about. So, aside from that, I will do my best to communicate what my experience was like because it was truly unlike anything else I've ever experienced. Despite the fact that I am a seasoned and experienced psychedelic enthusiast, this whole ceremony and the sorts of insights that I had and the kind of experience that I've had and even the lasting experiences that I've had since is truly different than anything else I've ever gone through. So, to back up a little bit, ayahuasca, if you're not familiar with what it is a sacred plant medicine brew. It is a psychedelic and it contains DMT, so it can induce things like hallucinations, visions, deep introspective journeying, creative problem solving, and also ayahuasca specifically can induce purging. This purging can be in the form of vomiting, crying, yelling, can come out the back end. I specifically had the experience mostly with blowing my nose, vomiting, and crying. And I'm going to get into that a little bit because this was something I was actually really concerned about before I went in and very scared about, but it was by far one of the easiest parts of it. So I think it's one of these things that, although your mileage may vary, it's not something that should be a barrier. Another important thing to say is that ayahuasca is administered by shamanic practitioners and it deserves a lot of respect and reverence. So it's often known as grandmother medicine, and this is because it gives out both healing love and tough love. It is a high level plant spirit. So if you work with psilocybin mushrooms or other sorts of plant energies, then you will likely know the feeling of being able to actually interact with the plant spirit. And this is a high level plant spirit and should be approached with a lot of reverence and a lot of respect. So it's important to know that going into it. Now, because the intention of this episode is not to be an ayahuasca 101, I will just link a YouTube documentary that I've found in the description just in case you're interested in knowing a little bit more. This YouTube documentary has a lot about what ayahuasca is and some interviews with some people who have had really, truly profound shifts from it, much like I have. So if you're interested in learning more, I'm going to link that for you. So the ceremony that I went to was on a full moon. It was a beautiful group ceremony that took place in this absolutely incredible space out in it was out in a nature setting, which I think really added to and enhanced the experience. There were three shamans that were facilitating the experience, and there were a couple of other helpers that were there to help people who are journeying. So, for example, if you're having a hard time, or if you need help or assistance to go to the washroom, or if you are struggling emotionally or anything like that, that was the purpose of both the facilitators and the helpers there. So it was an experience where I felt extremely safe, extremely held. It truly was a beautiful experience with beautiful people. I was a little bit concerned because I don't usually do psychedelics around other people. And so going into a group ceremony was something that was like kind of, it felt a little bit weird and kind of frightening for me. But once I got there and once we really started getting into the prep work, of which we did meditation, we did breath work, we talked about things, we did sharing of intentions, like there was so much there that really put me at ease before I even actually got to drink the medicine. To be perfectly honest with you, I'm going to be like dead ass honest here. I was so concerned because I have IBS, and because of the purgative nature of the medicine, I was very concerned that I was either going to vomit all over myself, shit my britches, or some other form of losing total control of my body. So I can say now with gratitude that the experience was nothing like that. And so if you are about to do this or you have interest in doing this and you find that as a barrier, I don't think that it's really as big as a concern as it feels like on your way in. Which brings me to another point. So, the medicine actually starts working on you before you take it, which is something that I've heard about, but it was really something else to actually experience it. So, on the week leading up to this experience, I knew that I was doing the diet beforehand. There's sort of like an energetic and physical detox process that you have to go through in order to make the most of it. And I had, the normal kind of jitters and fears and things like that. But I also started having these truly intense visionary dreams. Now, I'm a person who dreams a lot and has very memorable visual sorts of emotional dreams to begin with, but these were really something else. They felt very significant. So I just documented them and then kind of put them away because I didn't want to try and interpret them too much and like scare myself off from doing the experience. The interesting thing is that since coming out of the ceremony, it's been a couple weeks now, I've been able to interpret what those dreams meant. And so that has been something that has been truly mind bending on top of everything else. Now, prior to the ceremony, I was very careful about my own energetics on top of sort of the diet, right? So before I went to the ceremony, I did a very special body scrub beforehand. As you guys know, I'm like a bath magic queen. And I pulled some cards. I worked very hard on my intentions before I went in. I got some advice from a friend to be very clear with my intentions on what I was wanting to get from the experience and what I was not wanting to get. And I think that was truly fantastic advice. I had kind of thought I would go into it with this, what do you want to show me general thing, but I ended up going with something that was a little more honed in. And I think that the experience I had was overwhelmingly positive. So I'm glad that I did that. Now, while we were journeying, we were in this beautiful room. We had done a lot of cleansing, we had done the meditation, the breath work, all of that sort of stuff. We were in this beautiful room and we all had these beds. And so we laid on the beds with these eye masks on so that we could have kind of a truly introspective journey. It was, again, one of the most profound psychedelic experiences I've ever had in my entire life. I immediately came home and bought an eye mask for if I worked with psilocybin mushrooms from now forward. That is how I'm going to do it. When I drank my first cup, I was nervous, but I kind of just laid down and put the eye mask on. Each participant at the ceremony had a bucket for if you did need to purge, but I just laid there and kind of waited for it to kick in while they were doing the medicine songs. And I kind of just laid there and tried to keep myself calm. So my experience with psychedelics, like most people who do them, is that the more you try and control or fight the experience, the worse your outcome and your experience is going to be. So I really just laid there and tried to kind of stay cool, for lack of a better word. There was a couple times I kind of like moved the eye mask to see if anything was happening, but I had this overwhelming feeling that I could see better and that I felt better with the eye mask on. So I ended up keeping it on for the entirety of the journey. Eventually, I hit a point where I started to feel it start to work. So I started to feel a little bit nauseous, and I just started to feel that little bit of like, oh, something's happening. As I laid there, I started to get more and more fearful, and I started to, I guess it started to become active in my system. And all of a sudden, I was gripped with fear. So it felt as if my heart was beating a little bit too fast. And so I remember at one point I put my hand up to my heart to feel it, and I kind of had this voice of reason inside myself that was like, if you are dying, which, isn't a thing, but if you are dying, what is holding on to your chest going to feel? Like you just need to let go and let this happen. And so I did that. And as I did that, going into the medicine was absolutely terrifying. I will say, temporarily terrifying. And I couldn't say exactly why it was terrifying. Looking back, I don't remember, it wasn't like I was seeing demons or anything like that. It was just this, I felt like I was going through this like tunnel. At one point, I felt like I was inside a piano or an organ of some sort. There was a lot of very cartoonish red, black, and white kind of imagery. I just remember the feeling of it felt like I was getting squeezed through this tunnel, and I was understandably anxious. Now, again, I am a person who dreams a lot, and I'm a person who works with dreams, works with psychedelic medicines. So I had this strange feeling of familiarity. So I have these different, this is a whole other thing, but I have these different sorts of realities or worlds that I go to in dreams, and I end up having these reoccurring dreams. So, something that can sometimes happen when I do mushroom journeys is that I get this overwhelming feeling of going through those different worlds and that it's like a coming home. So, I had that same feeling of that I was in a familiar space. I felt like I had gone through some of those worlds right at the beginning of the ayahuasca journey, and it felt like a homecoming. So I felt as if it was like, oh, you're back again. And I was like, I'm here again. So I really enjoyed that it felt like a familiar experience to psilocybin, although drastically, dramatically different. Now, the thing about ayahuasca and the thing about how it is guided and administered by the shamanic practitioners is that they sing these medicine songs called icaros, and it was such a powerful and profound experience for me to experience music in that way. Now, I love music. Music is very powerful for me. I fucking love it. It makes me emotional, all that shit. I have a huge tie to music. I've never experienced music in the way that I experienced music that night. So these songs kind of guide and direct the experience. And I saw my vision being shaped by these songs. So I saw as the songs would kind of go in and out, like as the song, they would shift tempo while they shift from song to song. I saw spirits coming in and then fading back. I saw the world as not the world, but the world I was visioning in the journey. I saw it as being crafted by their songs. I actually saw them, the two people that were mainly singing the Icaros, I saw them as cartoon-ish creatures that were almost unfolding a banner of what I was visioning, and that these visions were created by it's truly hard to put into words, but it was almost like a hollow fractal matrix that was being built out of the light and the sound. So it was like the vision would build, and then as the song would change, it would deconstruct and build into something else. So that was incredibly profound for me, and one of the things that was the most lasting effect for me, even remembering it. It gives me chills thinking about it, and I felt absolutely overwhelmed with love and gratitude for the singers for singing these songs, and I was completely humbled and completely in awe. Now, there was a point where things were starting to build and I started to feel sicker, where during one of their songs, I actually sat up and then I purged. So this was vomiting, and I purged, and it wasn't like, when you've had too many drinks or when you're not feeling well, where it's like a struggle. It was such a clear, clean feeling purge. And the second I did, behind my eye mask, the entire room seemed to fill with this brilliant, dazzling light. And I felt so free, so clear. I felt like I had gotten rid of all my guilt, all my self doubt, all my insecurities. Like I just felt like I had thrown up all the negative bullshit that has been living inside of me. And I felt like I must have weighed as much as a baby bird. Like it was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had. And I felt overwhelmed with gratitude to the point of tears, that I felt so good. I was like, is this how it can be? Is this how we can feel? And I just felt so grateful. Without a doubt, the most blessed I have ever felt from, birthing. Now, again, through their songs and through these visions, I was seeing these creatures almost as if my vision was a frame. There was these little creatures that were coming in these sort of shaky ways, and then they would fade back. It was really quite wild. They're sort of like square-ish, very geometric little spirits. I felt like there was sprites pulling at my clothes, and it was strange because I had a very keen awareness of my body. It's very similar to psilocybin in that way, where it's not there's like there's all this shit going on in your head and your brain and your consciousness, but then there's also almost like a gatekeeper at the back of your skull that is keeping track of your body and making sure that your body is safe. And so I felt these like sprites pulling at my body. I felt like this sensation that there were these entities that were curious and coming around to like take a peek. Now, as this world was being built with light and sound, I would see sometimes, like I had the eye mask on and I was seeing all these different things, but then sometimes it felt like there was such a brilliant flash of light taking over the room, that it was almost like, if your eyes are closed and someone were to shine a flashlight directly in your face. They began to sing a song that was all about the earth, Mother Earth. This is a little hard for me to talk about because even remembering it is still an incredibly emotional experience for me. But they were singing this song about Mother Earth, and the song seemed to be both a celebration and a song of grief. And I just started thinking about the way that we interact with this planet. I saw a vision of this giant frog that was the spirit of Mother Earth, and there was these, again, these spirit creatures kind of coming in like a frame from the outside and fading back. And underneath this massive frog was, a waterfall and this beautiful landscape of trees and vines and just the animals, these beautiful things. And during this song, I started bawling uncontrollably. I was just weeping because I felt this overwhelming sense of like the earth taking care of us and shining her light for us despite whatever bullshit we're doing. And that, the terrible injustice of the world and the unfairness of the world is really just a reflection of the chaos of the cosmos, and the fact that she's still loving us, she still cares for us, all of that despite how we're behaving. And I had this sense of the human world and the human experience being this very base, um, unfair, suffering filled kind of adventure that we are going through. And it felt like through the song, the room would fill with light again, and I would feel just these overwhelmingly grateful feelings, and then it would go dark, and then I would again start weeping, and I could hear other people in the room weeping as well during that song. And I wondered if they were seeing the same thing as me. And I felt this overwhelming sense that this frog spirit, the spirit of the earth, was so grateful as well to the singers for moving us in this way, because it's truly something you can't go back from. Now, at this point, my experience became far less visionary and more introspective. And I began to purge more, but instead of vomiting, what was happening was my eyes were watering uncontrollably, and I was needing to blow my nose a lot. Now, I've had that experience on mushrooms before as well, where it felt like my body is trying to get rid of all the water in it. It was very strange. But I had this feeling like I had to get it all out, get it all out. And I was grateful that it was coming out that way and not the way I was afraid of. You know what I'm saying? Now, as I was going through this experience and it started to get very deeply introspective, I started seeing these visions of people that I knew throughout their lives from being a tiny baby, myself, people that I love, people that, I have had conflict with, I started seeing their lifetimes and how we are all just these like light beings, these little bundles of pure light energy, this purity, and that as we go through life and we have traumas, we have anger, we have situations where we feel insecure, we have, all these things happen to us that are so negative. I saw it almost like a wood bug shell, the armor plates. I saw throughout the lifespan all these plates, all these different circumstances, scenarios, situations where a plate would come down and it would become this heavy burden for these people. And I felt an overwhelming amount of compassion and love and forgiveness and understanding for myself and everybody else. And I saw that through a lifetime, these can become so protective. And so that's why some people end up, again, I saw it like a wood bug, curled up in theirs and so resistant to let go, as if they let go of that anger, that hurt, that pain, that it would somehow leave them very exposed. And again, I felt so much forgiveness, so much compassion for everything and everybody. And it's been like 2 weeks out from this now, and I have still struggled to lose it. I feel like it's hard to imagine ever being angry at anyone again in a true way where I could not see their side, their hurt, their pain, even if I didn't agree with it. Now, I think it's important to say that my experience seemed pretty fast. Felt like I had a lot of visionary stuff, a lot of introspective stuff, but then it kind of went through me quick, which is typically kind of normal for me. I get hit hard and fast. I don't seem to have the length of journeys, even with mushrooms, that other people seem to have. So I did end up taking another cup, and I will say that from that point on, there's not really much to talk about. I was in extreme physical discomfort. I basically laid in on my bed there, and I felt like I just couldn't get comfortable. I was kind of like moving from one side to the next. I still had a lot of sort of an introspective mental journey there, but there wasn't any sort of profound insights. I did purge again, but it didn't feel as, as much of a brilliant, detoxifying, lightning experience. It more was just something that happened. I think I probably purged something important. Otherwise, I wouldn't have felt called to take the second cup, but it wasn't like I got any sort of additional insights or an additional experience from that. Eventually I fell asleep, and that was that. So something that was very interesting about the experience was what has happened afterwards. So tomorrow it will be 2 weeks uh since that ceremony, and I have noticed some changes that have kind of happened over the past 2 weeks, lasting effects of it, that I'm curious whether or not they're going to stick around. I'm always cautiously optimistic about things. But I went home and I was so incredibly weepy. I cried almost the whole way getting home. Now, I'm telling you, getting back into the regular mundane realm after being in ayahuasca land is absolutely a culture shock. So, for example, when I left the place that I did this, there was somebody that I was on a country road, and I guess I wasn't driving fast enough for too fast, too fucking furious. Some guy in a pickup truck that like zoomed past me, even though I was already driving just around the speed limit, just slightly above, I would say. And I just felt overwhelming compassion for him because all I could see was his woodbug shell. And then I ended up having to go to the grocery store a couple days after I got home, and I'm telling you, that was a whole inexperience of in and of itself. So, the takeaways that I've had were basically I was extremely weepy the first few days. I couldn't even talk about my experiences without crying, and I still, when I think about them, have cried. I have continued to stay on the kind of elimination diet I was on before I went, not out of any sort of specific ethical or whatever concerns. I just have not felt like going back to the way I ate before. So I've been eating a lot less sugar, a lot less salt, a lot less processed foods. I have been eating almost fully plant-based. Which I was kind of a 90% vegetarian before that for no other reason except that I just don't like meat, and it's expensive, so why would I force myself to eat it? And so that's been interesting, the change in diet. although it has only been 2 weeks. I went home and I started cleaning out a lot of my doom piles. So I have really bad raging ADHD, and something that I didn't expect was the amount of clarity that I've felt since. So I don't know if I purged a lot of that. I don't know if it's a temporary afterglow effect, but I have come home and there's been a lot of things that I've been meaning to tackle, projects that I've been meaning to do, that for some reason, and if you have ADHD, you understand this, it feels like even though it's a 5 minute thing, it's like an insurmountable obstacle. And it's really frustrating, especially if you have neurotypicals in your life who don't understand that it's not that you're just being lazy. It's literally like there is a fucking mountain to climb in your brain that is standing between you and just fucking doing the thing. So it's been really interesting, that I've come home and I've started, like, I started cleaning. I've been able to initiate a project and then finish it, which I mean, I'm sure a lot of people take that for granted, but there's a lot of us that we literally can't or won't, for whatever reason. Other lasting takeaways have been, number one, I was able to interpret the dreams I had beforehand, which was very interesting, very cool. Just because I love metaphysical kind of, spooky things. For me, it was really interesting to see those dreams, look back on those dreams and go, I get it. I know exactly what that meant. And so that has been amazing. Self-consciousness, I'm a very self-conscious person. I've had to do a lot of work on self-confidence in terms of like insecurity, social anxiety, that sort of stuff. I feel like I purged a lot of the guilt, the shame, the negative bullshit and self-consciousness that I was carrying. At the end of the day, we're all human beings having a human experience. We're all kind of equipped with the same equipment, and so I've recognized that there's not a lot of space for that. And that's something that I've always preached and always have known, but I felt like I kindled a deeper connection to that knowledge now. The clarity mentally in terms of my ADHD has been absolutely unbelievable and out of this world. And I feel completely foreign to myself. So I don't know what that's all about, but I'm definitely enjoying it while it lasts. And just a deep sense of peace. So there's been more than a few things that have come up in the time since I've come back from ceremony that would have destabilized me, that would have kind of knocked me off my like peaceful horse. And I have been able to kind of look at them from an outside perspective, that feeling of compassion, forgiveness, and really recognizing that at its core, everybody is something so much beyond this human experience, and that all that negative stuff that we carry around can just be so deeply heavy. Just seeing that in action and that vision that I had was really deeply profound for me. But again, I felt very humbled by the experience. So as you guys know, I am a secular chaos witch, and I have always kind of identified as a skeptic while also being the most spooky bitch you'd ever meet. And so I really recognize that my skepticism and my clinging to it, or my insistence on telling other people I'm a skeptic before saying the most unhinged shit ever, was a place deep from my own wounds and trauma. So when you think about my own wood bug shell, I have been put into the psych ward for seeing and hearing things that were not there. And so my clinging to that word or identifying in that way is sort of a way of putting space between me and what I guess is something that feels threatening or unsafe for me. And so it was really interesting to see that. And I felt very called to become more of a student in learning the established language of magic. So I do a lot of intuitive magic. I really love helping people connect to their own inner magic. But this experience and just seeing how the songs interacted with weaving this light world that I was journeying in really made me see that there are different techniques that I'd be very curious and interested in learning more about in terms of the established framework and language of magic. And so that's kind of what I came away with it all with. If you have any questions or anything you want to hear more about, feel free to pop them down in the comments. Feel free to pop them down. I don't know what platform you're on, but there will be a space where you can kind of interact with me. You can always DM me, of course. Healing for Hot Messes is me on Instagram. Mandy M. Writer is me on Facebook. I don't really go on many other platforms consistently, so I won't even bother with those, but I will be posting this on YouTube and you can interact with me there in the comments. So Feel free to ask any questions. I tried to cover this as best that I could. Again, it's hard to describe an indescribable experience, but I certainly did my best. And thank you so much for listening. Now, I would be absolutely batshit fucking terrible at my job if I didn't say that my new book, Feral Self Care 100 Ways to Liberate and Celebrate Your Messy, Wild, and Untamed Self, is coming out soon, guys. It's going to be coming out on October 24th. So if you pre ordered, you are going to be in luck because it is going to be getting to you soon. So make sure to pre order if you haven't yet, or if you have, then look forward to it coming in the mail. And that's all I have. So, because I'm not like a fancy podcaster and I don't have like a team of people and all of that, we're just going to pretend there's an outro here with like a super fun jingle song, but there's actually not. Feel free to follow, subscribe, and share this if you feel called to do so. And as always, I am sending you love, light, and lols. Have a great day.